Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take big, dense ideas, step up the source material, and figure out exactly what you need to know.
And today, we are strapping ourselves into the 17th century.
We are. We're looking at one of the most radical political thinkers of his time, Baruch Spinoza, and his unfinished but fiercely insightful political treatise.
It is a foundational text,
Yeah,
and it feels, surprisingly modern.
it really does.
Our mission today is really a shortcut to deep understanding. We're going to analyze Spinoza's unique answer to this massive question.
Right.
How must government, whether it's a monarchy, aristocracy, or democracy, be structurally designed to avoid descending into tyranny? And how can it actually preserve peace and liberty?
And Spinoza's entire method, his whole approach, it's predicated on just tearing down previous philosophers.
Oh, completely.
He doesn't just critique them, he dismisses their work as dangerous fantasy.
She does. He argues that most political thinkers before him failed because they didn't study the world as it is. They studied it as they believed it ought to be.
So they were creating systems for an ideal human.
Exactly. An ideal person that simply does not exist. They were building castles in the air, creating theories that had no possible application in the real world.
Okay, so if the philosophers are all just writing fables, who does Spinoza actually respect? He kind of suggests it's the practitioners, the politicians.
Right. And it's a bit of a controversial take, but he notes that while politicians might be seen as cunning rather than wise, their views are often more accurate.
Because they have real-world experience.
They have extensive real-world experience. They get a fundamental, brutal truth. Human vice will persist as long as humans do.
You can't just hope people become angels.
You can't. You have to design a system that works with that vice, often relying on things like fear, not just a utopian idea of virtue.
And that really sets the stage for his whole methodology, doesn't it? He approaches human behavior not as a moralist, but more like a scientist. Let's unpack that a bit.
It's a huge shift. Spinoza demands that we study human behavior with the same detached intellectual rigor that we use in mathematics or physics.
So emotions like love, hate, anger.
All of them. Love, hate, anger, desire, pity. They shouldn't be treated as moral failings or vices to condemn.
They're just properties.
They're just natural properties of human nature. They're forces, just like heat, cold, or storms are properties of the air.
Wow. That's a powerful philosophical move. It just strips away all the moral judgment and forces you to deal with humanity as this raw, powerful material.
Exactly.
So what does this scientific observation tell him about our default condition?
Well, it reveals that humans are necessarily subjected to these passions, and they're not always pretty.
Right.
He explicitly says that people are more prone to revenge than they are to pity. And crucially, everyone wants to be the first man.
The top dog.
The dominant figure, yeah. And this drive for superiority, it naturally leads to conflict and instability.
So that's a pretty pessimistic starting point. If passion and competition are the constants, then any kind of high-minded moral injunction like, say, love your neighbor,
It's basically irrelevant.
especially in the places that matter most, like courts or palaces.
That's his devastating conclusion. He says that believing the majority of people can be guided by reason alone is the same as, and I love this phrase, dreaming of the golden age.
So that's why he has to design governments based on institutions, not individual virtue,
It's the only way. You need structural safeguards and limits.
which I guess naturally leads us out of the state of nature. If we're all these passionate, competing individuals, what defines our rights in that raw state?
It takes us to the law of nature.
Yeah.
And for Spinoza, in nature, every entity has a right that extends exactly as far as its power.
So my right is just my strength.
Literally. Your right is measured by your power to exist and act. And it's determined not by reason, but by all the desires and instincts that compel you to survive.
So whether I act wisely or foolishly, I'm still acting according to natural law.
In that state, yes.
But if my right is only as strong as my ability to defend it, then the natural state is just constant war.
Precisely. A state of total insecurity. And that makes natural right just a theoretical idea, because there's no way to secure it.
And this insecurity is what creates the need for civil society.
Yes, humans are social animals. We can't live without common laws and a collective unified power.
And that collective strength creates a greater collective right.
That's the foundation of the state.
And once that power is established, things like justice and law, even sin, they fundamentally change. They become human inventions.
They do. He makes this really key distinction. Sin can only be conceived within the state.
So in the state of nature, you can't sin.
You can only sin against yourself, maybe. But once you have common laws, sin is just any act forbidden by those laws. And justice is just the will to do what the law says is good.
So the state literally creates morality.
In a legal sense, yes.
Okay, this brings us to the citizen's duty. The citizen has to obey the state's commands, even if they seem unjust, because the alternative is anarchy. It's the lesser of two evils.
That's the basis for civil obedience. But, and this is where it gets really, really interesting, Spinoza says, yes, you must obey, but he also places these crucial, immutable limits on state power.
Wait, so even the all-powerful sovereign is constrained?
It's constrained by human nature itself.
Okay, so what specifically can the state not demand?
It can't compel internal belief. For instance, the state cannot force you to genuinely believe that God doesn't exist or that a finite thing is infinite.
You can't legislate a thought.
You can't. And it can't force you to love what you hate or hate what you love.
Yeah.
More practically, it cannot force you to testify against yourself.
Because even if a ruler decrees it, trying to enforce it is just futile. You can't force someone to do something they believe is worse than death.
Exactly. If the state tries to force its citizens into actions that violate their fundamental self-preservation, it loses the foundation of its power.
Which is fear and respect.
Right. The state is ultimately limited by the built-in constraints of human psychology.
That is a profound boundary. So let's shift now to how these governments should be structurally secured, starting with monarchy. Spinoza insists you can't rely on the good character of your rulers.
This is the institutional pivot point. The goal is peace and security. And Spinoza says rebellions and conflict are not the fault of wicked citizens. They're the fault of poor structural organization.
So the system has to be designed so that rulers cannot act against the public interest.
Regardless of whether they're guided by reason or just pure passion, the structure has to channel them.
Now, the sovereign is technically above the civil law, but Spinoza says the state itself can sin. What does that even mean? How does an entity sin against itself?
The state sins when its actions inevitably lead to its own ruin.
Its own collapse.
Yes. This happens when the ruler acts against reason, which for Spinoza is the only true guide to self-preservation. When the ruler sacrifices the common good for their own passions, they destabilize the state.
And he's really specific about the kind of behavior that does this, isn't he? The things that turn fear into something else.
Into disgust. Yeah, the examples are vivid.
What are they?
A ruler openly disrespecting their own laws, impoverishing the citizens, attacking citizens' wives or daughters, or, gross public misconduct like getting drunk and stripping with prostitutes.
Okay, yeah, that would do it.
Actions like that destroy the moral authority of the state. They remove the respect, and the ruler becomes vulnerable.
That's a very clear line. So how does he design a monarchy to be stable? He notes that they're often closer to servitude than liberty.
He proposes mandatory structural checks. First, the king must have a very large council of advisors,
Okay.
drawn from the citizenry, serving short, rotating terms. And the king cannot make any significant decisions without first consulting this council.
So that checks the whims of one person. It's like a built-in reality check.
Precisely, a form of distributed reason. Second, the army must consist only of citizens, no foreign mercenary.
Why is that so important?
A citizen army's loyalty is tied to the state itself, to the commonwealth they're defending, not just to the king's payroll. They're far less likely to obey tyrannical orders against their own people.
And the third mandate is the most radical one, isn't it? The one about property.
For the 17th century, absolutely. He says fields, land, and houses should be public property.
So nationalized land.
Rented out annually, not owned privately. This does a couple of things. It ensures state revenue, but more importantly, it prevents the king from consolidating power by seizing the land of his rivals. It makes everyone dependent on the state's stability.
So the king's survival is structurally tied to the public good. He can't thrive if the people don't.
He can't be truly independent of them. It forces stability through necessity.
All right, so that's monarchy. Let's transition to aristocracy, the rule of the few. What advantages does he see in that?
Well, he argues that a large governing assembly is inherently more stable than a single king.
Because it's not mortal.
Kings are mortal, and their will is, unstable. An assembly is long-lasting, and its will, when it's big enough, is considered absolute law, or very close to it.
But the stability of the few, it seems to require kind of passivity from the general population, right?
It does. He says the aristocracy is most secure when the populace, the plebe, is least threatening. While subjects might fight with amazing virtue for their homes, all military officers have to be from the ruling class.
You keep control of the force.
Exactly.
But the big problem in any system run by the few is that power tends to concentrate even more, right? Feuds, jealousy, oligarchy.
That's the main danger. And he sets up two crucial structural checks to fight it.
Okay, what's the first one?
A fundamental law that dictates the ratio of rulers to the populace, ideally around one noble for every 50 citizens.
To keep the ruling class large enough to resist a takeover by a few powerful families.
Right. If the numbers drop too low, it just collapses into an oligarchy.
And the second check.
This one is brilliant. To guard against the arrogance of the main ruling council, a second council of lifetime representatives should be established.
Lifetime tenure.
So they're independent, and their sole duty is to preserve the foundational laws and prosecute any state officials who violate them. It's a built-in watchdog.
I really appreciate that he gets into the mechanics of governance, especially justice. Because perceived unfairness is one of the fastest ways to breed that disgust he talks about.
He takes very specific, very modern measures against corruption. Judges must be numerous, at least 51 or 61, to make bribery difficult.
And he worries that if judges are all nobles, they won't punish their own.
They'd fear punishing their peers while harshly prosecuting the common citizens. So to ensure impartiality,
Secret ballots.
judicial decisions have to be reached by secret ballots. And what's really striking for the era, he insists that the use of torture to extract confessions should never be allowed.
No torture. In the 17th century, that's amazing.
It is. It shows his commitment to long-term stability. He understood that a corrupt justice system destroys the moral authority of the state from within.
So his whole project really relies on institutions, not on hoping for good people.
Exactly. Short tenures, big councils, secret ballots, economic interdependence. It all forces rulers to act in the public good, even if it's just out of self-interest and necessity.
The whole deep dive really reveals this profound dependence on necessity and structure over any kind of idealism. It's a purely structural solution to the problem of human passion.
And that takes us right back to his final, most critical definition. What true peace really is.
Right. It's not just the absence of war.
There's just a pause. For Spinoza, true peace is a virtue. It's rooted in strength of mind and genuine mutual harmony.
A city ruled only by fear and inertia, where citizens are just managed like sheep. That's not peace. He calls that a city of solitude.
It is. It lacks the vitality and virtue needed for real security. And that raises an important question based on everything we've talked about.
Right.
Spinoza says any ruler whose misconduct turns citizen fear into disgust will lose their power. The foundation of the state is psychological.
Right.
So if the stability of any government ultimately relies on managing the citizens' respect and fear, is the core function of the state less about justice, in the moral sense, and more about skillfully managing public perception to preserve its own legitimacy.
A fascinating, pragmatic, and maybe a slightly chilling thought for you to explore on your own. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the source material that matters.